In 1996, an issue of the journal Nature posted a discussion about what readers thought the last of a species should be called. Several options were offered up. How about ender or endling? Another reader, feeling that those were too weak, preferred terminarch, which she felt expressed more positivity. Still another reader put forth relict, feeling that this word already existed, so a new word need not be invented. Before long, endling was ultimately adopted, and the stories of endlings began to be told. This is part 1 of my series on endlings. In this video, we're going to look at 6 species and subspecies of plant and animal. Some have been extinct for a long time, while others are still with us. Their tales are tragic, serving as a stark reminder of how fragile our world can be, and the role we play in preserving its biodiversity. Welcome back to All About Nature. On my channel, I try to bring nature-related content that's both educational and entertaining. If you like this kind of content, then please consider liking the video, leaving a comment, or even subscribing to the channel. I really appreciate your support. In the salt marshes of Merritt Island in Florida, once lived a subspecies of seaside sparrow. It was known as the Dusky Seaside Sparrow because it had much darker coloration than the other subspecies. It also had a distinct call, which sounded like a buzz, much like that of an insect. While the birds would have been a welcome sight to locals, Merritt Island had another small inhabitant that the locals hated: mosquitoes. In the 1940s, the chemical DDT began to be used as a form of mosquito control, but it also had a seriously negative impact on birds. The chemical reduced the breeding abilities of female birds, and it caused the shells of their eggs to be so thin that even a slight bump could break them. It was a devastating blow to the Dusky Seaside Sparrow, and their numbers crashed. The birds nested in the marshes on the island, but in an effort to further control the mosquito population, the marshes were flooded, and the Dusky Seaside Sparrow's nests were destroyed. By the time DDT was finally banned in 1972, it was too late. Ongoing pesticide use killed off or contaminated the sparrow's remaining food sources, and 1975 marked the last time that a female was sighted. In 1976, only 6 sparrows could be found, all of which were males. In an effort to better track the Dusky Seaside Sparrows, they were all tagged with a different colored band: green, red, yellow, white, blue, and orange. After banding the birds and observing their movements, scientists made an interesting discovery. The Dusky Seaside Sparrows rarely traveled more than 1 or 2 miles from the place that they were born. The different banded birds were not all living in the same vicinity, so this meant that they were each living alone, unable to find any other of their kind. From 1976 to 1978, Orange Band was isolated in the St. John unit of the St. John's National Wildlife Reserve. Researchers were surprised when he did something uncharacteristic of this subspecies. In 1978, after years of living alone, Orange Band disappeared from his tiny range. When he popped up again, he was 8 miles further south in the Beeline unit, where he had finally found another member of his own species. He was observed living alongside Blue Band. In 1980, the decision was made to round up the remaining 6 birds and bring them into a captive breeding program. No females existed, but the goal of the program was to create hybrids by mating the Dusky Seaside Sparrow males with the similar Scott's Seaside Sparrow. 5 of the 6 birds were captured, but Green Band couldn't be caught. He was seen one last time in July, and then never seen again. While in the breeding program, Red Band also died of a tumor. The remaining 4 birds were moved to a small island reserve in Walt Disney World, known as Discovery Island. The breeding program wasn't overly successful, only ever producing 5 hybrid chicks. It was believed that the hybrids weren't capable of passing on the Dusky Seaside Sparrow's coloration, so the breeding program was abandoned, and all of the offspring either died or escaped. Over the next 3 years, yellow band, white band, and blue band would die, leaving orange band as the endling for the Dusky Seaside Sparrow. In 1987, orange band was very old. He was at least 8 and possibly as old as 13. He was blind in one eye and had been living on Discovery Island all alone for over a year. On June 17th of 1987, he was found dead, and the Dusky Seaside Sparrow was officially declared extinct. Located in the Indian Ocean, the Mascarene Islands are the famous home of one of the most iconic extinct species of all time, the dodo. Human arrival wiped out dozens of species on the island, mostly birds and giant tortoises, but it also had a devastating impact on the plant life of the Mascarenes. The first settlement on the island of Mauritius was in 1598. As the settlers ate their way through the local fauna, they also cleared the dense forests that covered the island for lumber, firewood, and agriculture. Today, only 5% of the original forest remains. One of the species of tree that used to be abundant on the mountains of the island was Hyophorbe Amaris. This palm grows to about 12 meters tall, has a thin gray trunk, and a small set of leaves at the very top. While once abundant, today there is only one left in the entire world. In 1870, the Currapee Botanic Gardens were established. It has an informal layout, and included within is the last specimen of Hyophorbe Amaris. No one knows if this specimen was deliberately moved and planted into the garden, or if it was growing there when the garden was established and just never removed. And as the forests were cut down around the island, the garden acted as an unintentional sanctuary for this tree. In the 19th and 20th centuries, the palm was popular in botanic gardens around the world. But 2 world wars meant that all of the international specimens were destroyed. In the 1970s, botanists went searching for it again, and quickly realized that not only were there none being kept internationally, but that all of the wild trees had also been destroyed. Today, that last specimen has been given the nickname of the loneliest plant in the world. Unlike other species of plant that are known from only a single specimen, no one has ever succeeded at propagating H. amaricauli. While seedlings have been produced through in vitro germination, they all died shortly after sprouting. So the loneliest plant continues to stand alone in the Currapee Botanic Gardens, and is likely the next species to join the long list of extinct flora and fauna from the Mascarenes. One of the largest bovine species to ever walk the earth used to flourish across Europe, Asia, and North Africa. The Aurochs was huge, standing about 1.8 meters tall at the shoulder and having horns as much as 80 centimeters long. As cattle were being domesticated in the Near East and South Asia, Aurochs were used to produce the first ever livestock. This means that today, Aurochs genes survive in many of the varieties of domestic cattle farmed around the world. Despite domestication, wild herds were hunted regularly by humans, and around 3,000 years ago, they disappeared from much of their range, only managing to hold on in Central and Eastern Europe. By the 16th century, the clear-cutting of forests and overhunting by people had reduced their range to a single marshy forest in Poland. Only 50 animals remained. Hunting aurochs became the privilege of nobility, with aurochs horns becoming greatly prized. In 1626, the last male aurochs died, and his horns were collected by the King of Poland. Only a single cow remained, wandering the forests alone. In 1627, she died of old age, and with her, the species was gone. There is some recent evidence that some Aurochs may have survived in Bulgaria a few decades longer, but the female in Poland is the last individual humans knew about, and is generally considered to be the endling of the species. Today there are efforts to try to breed domestic cattle back to something that is as close as possible in appearance to an Aurochs. They've been released into wild spaces in an effort to restore prehistoric landscapes. While superficially these cattle are similar to Aurochs, genetically they aren't the same, and the main breeding program was abandoned in 2018 after nearly a century of operation. On the Iberian Peninsula in southwestern Europe lives a species of mountain goat with long horns and relatively short legs, the Iberian Ibex. 4 subspecies are recognized: the southeastern, the western, the Portuguese, and Pyrenean. But today, only 2 survive. Over the past few centuries, all 4 subspecies have declined significantly. Hunting pressures, agricultural development, and environmental deterioration all contributed to the species becoming increasingly rare. In 1886, the Portuguese Ibex was down to the final herd of around a dozen animals. Because it's the males that were primarily targeted because of their large horns, the remaining ibexes were all female. In 1889, an old female was captured and photographed. This is the only photograph in existence of the Portuguese Ibex. Sadly, the animal in the photograph didn't survive in captivity, and within 3 days of this picture being captured, she died. The final sighting of a living Portuguese Ibex was in 1892, and with her death, the Portuguese Ibex was gone. Another of the subspecies, the Pyrenean Ibex, was the next to fall. Known in Spanish as the bucardo, the Pyrenean Ibex lived in the northern Pyrenees Mountains, in Spain and southern France. It faced the same pressures the Portuguese Ibex had faced, and by the 1950s, only a small population remained in Ordesa National Park. Poaching likely continued even after it was banned, but the main threat to the Pyrenean Ibex changed to something new. Farmers were bringing their livestock to graze in the park more and more. Sheep, goats, cattle, and horses were all consuming the grasses before the ibex could. And to make matters worse, other ungulates had been introduced to the region, including fallow deer and mouflon. The Pyrenean Ibex couldn't compete. By the end of the 20th century, they were down to their last surviving member, a female that was nicknamed Celia. She was captured and tranquilized on April 20th, 1999, and a small clipping from her ear was taken so her genome could be sequenced. On January 6, 2000, a fir tree fell on her and killed her. The Pyrenean Ibex became the first extinction of the 21st century, but amazingly, they wouldn't stay extinct. 3 years later, using the genome sequenced from her ear clipping, scientists managed to clone Celia. On July 30th, 2003, her clone was born, but she immediately showed signs of respiratory distress. It turned out that she had abnormalities in her lungs that had gone undetected. After only a few minutes, the newborn kid died, making the Pyrenean Ibex the only animal to have ever gone extinct twice. In 2005, a large new species of tree frog was discovered in Panama. Given the common name of Rabbs' fringe-limbed tree frog, the species was truly unique. For one, it was a gliding species of frog, able to use its webbed hands and feet to soar from the canopy of trees to safety as it attempted to elude predators. But their breeding behavior was by far the most unique thing about them. The species laid eggs in water-filled tree holes, where the males fiercely guarded their territories from other males. After the eggs were laid and the tadpoles hatched, the males would continue to care for and feed their offspring. It was the only known species of frog where the young survived by eating the skin cells of their fathers. The tree frogs went extinct from a combination of two factors. One problem was their incredibly small range. They were only known from a small area of cloud forest on the Pacific-facing slopes of a single mountain range, and it's estimated that their total range covered no more than 100 square kilometers. The other problem was an outbreak of the amphibian chytrid fungus within their range. This fungal infection thickens the skins of amphibians, causing their organs to shut down and almost always kills any frog that it infests. Scientists knew that the fungus was going to cause problem for the new species, so in 2006, the scientists that discovered these tree frogs made a crucial decision. All of the specimens of Rabbs' fringe-limbed tree frog that had been collected to describe the species were sent to facilities in Panama and the United States to safeguard them against extinction. It was just in time, too. The amphibian chytrid fungus outbreak hit and rapidly decimated the only known wild population of the species. The last wild documentation of Rabbs' fringe-limbed tree frog was in 2007, when a single male was recorded calling in the mating season. After that, no specimen was ever recorded alive in the wild again, and only the captive population remained. In captivity, the species thrived, but replicating their breeding conditions proved to be too difficult. This is because the researchers hadn't gotten a chance yet to perform an in-depth study of the species' breeding habits before it disappeared. The captive frogs would breed, but the tadpoles would almost immediately die. So one by one, as the captive frogs died, the species inched towards extinction. Their fate was sealed when the last female died in 2009 at the Atlanta Botanical Gardens. By 2012, there were only 2 males left. One of them was suffering from declining health, and the decision was made to euthanize it. The species had its endling. The last of Rabbs' fringe-limbed tree frogs survived at Zoo Atlanta and was given the nickname Toughie. He was kept in a special enclosure called the frog pod, which ensured that he wasn't exposed to any pathogen that would shorten his life. While captive frogs had mated, none of the males had ever been observed performing breeding vocalizations in captivity. That is until December 14th, 2014. For the first time ever since arriving at the zoo, Toughie began to sing. Of course, there was no way he could know that he was the sole remaining survivor of his species, and no female would ever come. On September 26, 2016, being an estimated 12 years old, Toughie died at Zoo Atlanta. While we can't yet say for certain that some wild population of Rabbs' fringe-limbed tree frog won't be found holding on in an unexplored part of Panama, it seems that the species has been lost forever. The IUCN still lists it as critically endangered, though it's unlikely that they will ever be seen again. And that's it for today's video. In next week's video, we'll hear the stories of 6 more endlings, including the real story of the last thylacine. What other endlings have you heard of? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to come back for part 2, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon for notifications. I try to upload a new video every week on Saturdays at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I also need to say a special thanks to my patrons. Without their ongoing support, I wouldn't be able to produce a video like this every week. If you want to support the channel, consider joining us on Patreon. The link is in the video description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.